Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be looking at another Lorenzo Mattotti book, this one also with his longtime writer, collaborator, Kramsky. I think that's Leo Kramsky, is that right? I'm blanking on the name. So this is a pretty beat-up copy, but these books are really hard to find now. This is an old NBM Comics lit, an adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Mattotti and Kramsky. Pretty beat up. The back cover's pretty much falling off. It's an old library copy, but I'm so in love with Mattotti's stuff that, I really want to see this book and I want to see the art in it. And if I have to spend $35 on a beat up copy because a nice copy is $200, then that's what I'm going to do. It's unfortunate that this stuff's not evergreen because Mattotti, I don't know, there's so many artists like Mattotti and Munoz. A lot of people were saying, I put up the Alac Center, like, how do we not have an constantly in print Munoz library? How do we not have an Otomo library, a Moebius library? I think Mattotti's like that as well. This is such an important creator. It's really sad that the American audience doesn't have constant access to the work. But anyways, I'm just going to flip through page by page, put notes on things that jumped out to me. But these books are old, out of print, and this art is important. The compositions are stunning. The color work is stunning. The thing I always come back to with Mattotti is there's hardly ever a shape. Like you pick one shape, subdivide however you want down to a shape, and every shape is a perfect, beautiful shape, unless it's supposed to be awful and painful like in this. So yeah, right out the gate, come on. In a career, I'd be happy to do one drawing like that, and this guy's got a book full of them. You can see the Wayne Thiebaud influence that I always talk about right out the gate here with kind of like the San Francisco tram, the Bay Area figurative, the Richard Diebenkorn all over the place in this. This book with the Dr. and Jekyll Hyde, you get a lot more of his Francis Bacon, the kind of gnarly, nasty Francis Bacon stuff. Also with all of the surreal stuff, as you often always get in Mattotti's work. There's a heavy dose of JEKYLL as well. So I think those are like the main influences that all come together. But as I pointed out in other reviews, Mattotti is someone that really has obviously consumed the entire history of visual art and synthesized it into his own unique thing. Like, I just see traces of every other master ever in his work turned into his own unique thing. And I don't know what else you could aspire to as an artist other than that. And you get a guy that can paint, that can illustrate, that can make comics. He's doing stuff for the Olympics, doing stuff for the New Yorker. I wish I would have been a Lorenzo Mattotti fan much earlier. Impeccable. This face, so good. Compositions, so good. Everywhere. Colors, so good. I don't know how you even plan for these things. Like, how many color studies do you have to do? How many sketches? I mean, if you look at his illustration work, how many sketches he does for any one illustration, I'm assuming that same amount of work goes into the panels here. Astonishing stuff. Like for this to pull this trick where you've got this stained glass window and it's reflecting the lights like it's got here, and then you're flipping that grid. There's so much beautiful, subtle color, compositional stuff. And then it's like each composition here works great on its own, and it's tempting to think he's probably working on them not together on a page, but then the flow of the pages is always so structurally solid as well that there must be, I don't know, I'm very curious to see how these exist. Do these exist on a board together like this? Are they individual panels? Other than this, where we get like a zoom in of a panel, the textural stuff is not suggesting to me that it's being drawn at all different sizes and reproduced. Like, the textural stuff looks the same piece to piece. It's not like this was a way larger piece that has way more reduction on it, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong, but there's kind of a consistency of feel throughout, which suggests they're all drawn at about the same ratio to the print. Really love this, though. This is a moment of zoom here, and I think in this one moment it's really effective, and it does change the textural quality, and that's purposeful on this one because that textural grit adds so much to that sneer. And if you want to talk about just his shape work, his color for emotion, his shapes in terms of abstracting to get like the essence of an emotion or something, there's like Brunelleschi level, like essence chasing going on in his work. Yeah, just astonishing all throughout. Like that is like the abstract expression of a malice and a sneer. That face, I just love that face. Everything about that's so good. I will also say, and this is a credit to Kramsky, I'm gonna guess, I don't know, but the writing in this, and I don't know, like Kramsky must just be choosing what dialogue to keep, what descriptions to keep. I don't know, but it very much makes me want to go read the original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I never have, I'll admit, to see if some of the dialogue and stuff is in the original one, because there were thematic things in here that were kind of surprising to me, but also definitely make sense for the period. I'm not sure if it's stuff that's in the original book or if it's just Kramsky being aware that thematically it would be a good time to put this idea in. But I was really kind of surprised by the dialogue in this panel here, where the character says that he's explaining that like Dr. Jekyll has split off like this subsection of his personality, kind of explaining what goes on. And he says he split him into two. I say two because the state of my knowledge does not pass beyond that point. Man will ultimately be known as a mere polity of multifarious, incongruous, and independent denizens, which is a perfect description of like how psychology understands the psyche today, is like a bunch of centers in the brain that all have their own jobs, and so they have their own needs and motivations, and they're driving the human, spaceship to go get those things. And I always took like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde as a narrative, just the common understanding of it is like man versus his inner animalistic desires, which to me always seemed very kind of simple and not quite right. And I always think that man has worse desires than animals anyways. Like animals don't like build Nazi concentration camps and shit. So I was very, very surprised to find such a modern idea. And then I had to go back and look at when was this written. This was written in 1883. Thus spake Zarathustra, 1886. Freud is 1899. So in a sense, if that is in the original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he's positing this idea of the subconscious mind made of multiple competing unconscious, potentially irrational desires, that man's not the rational animal, which all makes sense in terms of an Enlightenment era piece of literature. It's just not what I've ever heard in the discussion about it, and it's surprising, especially surprising, given that it predates Freud and that by a few years. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, this is already around in the air just casually in conversations where people had it, just hadn't been put into a book in Freud yet. Was this, an artist really being tapped into the zeitgeist? I'm very curious. So if people know more about the relationship between the original Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, which I need to go read now to see if that's even in there, and Freud and all of that, and the timelines of all those, I'm very curious about it, because this is basically describing the third of what Luciano Floridi says are four revolutions: the Copernican, the Darwinian, the Freudian, and then the Turing. So really, really interesting, and that makes Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde a much more interesting piece of literature to me. I'm always interested in like influences. It's obvious to see some Picasso here coming into Mattotti's work. Like I said, obviously consumed the entire history of art, synthesized it somehow. But also seeing stuff like this shows me some artists he may have influenced himself. That looks very Dave Cooper to me. Something about the nose and the teeth and the mouth, the stretch of it feels very Dave Cooper. And for a book like this, or Mattotti, I don't know when this one came out, but Mattotti's earlier work like Murmur coming out in the 80s, this one's 2002, so this is more recent. But I could definitely see that have been being a chain of influence. So again, I don't know, just speculating. When we get into the transformation scenes, transforming into Mr. Hyde, it's absolutely just grotesque imagery. I know for a fact I saw this stuff a long time ago. I've seen Mattotti's work. I've seen his Dracula, and when I originally saw this stuff, I hated it. Probably because of stuff like this is just so ugly and painful. Now that I'm older and have like maybe a little more sophisticated taste in things, I recognize how masterful these are. This one's beautiful. But things like this is very Francis Bacon, painful, ugly. Ugh. Yeah, there's things that are done in there that you probably shouldn't do that are done on purpose to make you feel gross, and then they're still balanced out with impeccable like other compositional choices to still make it all kind of hold together, which is phenomenal. I just didn't know enough. I wasn't sophisticated enough to see that when I was younger, and I am very appreciative of the fact that I have gained enough through my years to actually see it, because I just wasn't seeing it, and it's so on the surface. How beautiful. The shapes. It's all about I don't know, the shapes, the colors, everything. Everything's fucking impeccable. This is another thing I was curious about. Like at the time that this story was being told, I saw that there was some saxophones and then some drums, and that was surprising to me because I associate that a little later with like jazz, but yeah, like the circus vaudeville Moulin Rouge type of thing. It makes sense. I'm not enough of a historian, especially music. That's a badass drawing right there too. He's so good at like capturing the icon of an emotion, translating that into a pose and a shape. I do wish that Mattotti would take on a story where he'd have more reason to play with the beautiful color combinations. A lot of his work, like this one, has good reason to lean into the ugly. But again, within the ugly, that's a very beautiful, beautiful composition. And these, again, all beautiful compositions, but he knows how to make them painful, too. He knows the color choices to make it queasy. Astonishing composition. Look at that. Look at that distortion of the face right there. Again, like, if I drew one thing like that before I died, I'd be happy. And it's like every panel of this book. Knows how to use diagonals like a motherfucker. Those are so hard to use right without having stuff spill off the composition like it's a slide. Like this, it should all just slide right down off that composition, but boom, 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 he's bracing it up. Got some Dali kind of distortions here, or that de Chirico. Some Edward Hopper in a lot of this, yeah. Something else I noticed in this book that was really interesting to me that made me have some questions about how the artwork was made is there's a whole bunch of places all throughout the book where he has like slashed, it looks like red ink with a razor blade or something across the top of what otherwise looks like a bunch of pastel drawings. I find it hard to believe that like ink would set on the pastel like that, because the pastel, it looks like oil pastels and the ink would have water in it. So I don't know if that was done like on a piece of Mylar and scanned and put on later, or it's because he's scoring it into the surface, it's sticking or whatever, but it's a really interesting effect all the way throughout. And just given what the rest of the materials look like, it materially doesn't make much sense to me. So again, yeah, masterful shit. These two compositions, oh my God. See the big razor marks. So maybe he's just cut into the surface enough that it sticks. Love this distortion of the figure. I think Mattotti has really freed me up to... I don't know why I got off of this, but man, I started out loving Klimt, Schiele, Kent Williams, all those people distort the hell out of the figure, and I got so stuck on realism for so long, and someone like Mattotti is so freeing. Like, that makes all kinds of sense visually in terms of composition and storytelling. No sense anatomically. I don't care. It looks amazing. So really liberating looking at all of this Mattotti stuff. Foolish young me. Yeah, see, he just starts distorting all those shapes more, gives a lot more to her nose than he would have before. Really just knows when to put what information in and when not to. His use of equiluminant colors is beautiful. That's something that he's definitely getting from like the Diebenkorn and Thiebaud's. What I mean by equiluminant is a lot of colors in here. If you took a picture of this in black and white, they'd be about the same gray, and so you wouldn't see as much variation. It would look much more flat all throughout here. A lot of these color effects. When you see them in color, though, the part of your brain that processes color is seeing there's difference. The part of your eyes that are picking up the just value, they're sending information back to your brain saying it's all flat, and the part that's sending back information about color saying no, there's variety. And the argument between those two things creates that electric glitter of when you get two like colors next to each other and they buzz. A painting like this is doing that all throughout, and it's the only way you can recover a sense of luminosity in a flat piece of art like this that's not glowing from behind, is you can make the colors glitter. And Mattotti's the master of that. I mean, his work is absolutely saturated in it. It's why he's going in and putting like blues and oranges along the edges of things. He's getting that pop of like a contrasting color. Like, yeah, that's a trick he steals from Wayne Thiebaud, totally. I'm sure Thiebaud's getting from someone else, but it's a very Wayne Thiebaud thing. Yeah, the combinations of the reds and the blue are pretty equiluminant along here. The orange is not equiluminant, but it's a contrast to the blue, so they're like aggravating and intensifying each other. Yeah, it's just masterclass, masterclass, masterclass. And here you've got like the Mattotti thing, but it softens up and like is a little less sharp and delineated on some of the shapes, and blah, like his Francis Bacon comes out. And I mean, like, yeah, when you're drawing this monstrous man eviscerating a woman, and see in this one, it's not even as pleasant of a composition. Like, so the shapes aren't as nice and things like that. And like, that's all intentional. Those are gross shapes. They're bad shapes. And he's doing it on purpose to make you feel disgusted. It's fantastic. Let's go into like futurism for a second there. More Bacon to JEKYLL. The colors on that, so sickly. It's also good. It's a hell of a composition. I don't remember what I put that sticky tab for. I probably just thought that was nice. It was hard not to sticky tab every one of these images. So yeah, this book is hard to get a hold of, especially in a decent copy. But I would say, like this one, you know, the pages are fine. The back cover's totally busted, but like all the images in it are fine. The pages themselves are fine. To me, this is worth it because you will learn so much. So if you can find yourself even a busted copy like this of any Mattotti work, I would say it's definitely worth it if you don't have his stuff. This page here, again, we get some more influences. That futurist thing comes back. That's all chalk throughout here. But then there's a huge mix of like George Gross type of era German art in here too. If you've ever seen the art, or the modernist German art between the two world wars, we should have seen World War II coming. It was in the air. So like pay attention to what the arts are doing, because like it's saturated in this. It's not as colorful as this, but like saturated in the depression and pain and gray and miserable and all these sharp shapes and tweaked faces. And it was obviously an awful thing that the country lived through during and after World War I. You could see it, what the people were feeling, and it's no wonder that went bad. There's no excuse, but it's also, you know, and so like it's a good reason to pay attention to what's going on in the arts. But yeah, there's a lot of that in here. He always knows exactly what little flavor of art history to reference to get the exact vibe he needs. Those are so good and so painful. Again, that kind of Francis Bacon, Kathy Kollowitz kind of vibes. A lot of Edvard Munch in a lot of these as well. And just this awful. And like some of this is like where you start getting some weird combinations of colors that you should like, these weird blued out grays with these oranges, and no, it's just disgusting. But it's supposed to be disgusting, and it works so well here. It's just, yeah, masterful stuff. And then you end on a pretty beautiful, almost, again, like a Vermeer-esque type of glowing image with these weird red slashes I'm talking about. And there's some over here where he's drawing, so it does look like he just kind of took a pen and drew on top of it, I guess. You know, you could do that on pastel. So I'm going to have to go play with that at work on Monday with the supplies we got in the class. So another Mattotti masterpiece. I really got to get a hold of Fire. I think that was his first book. I don't know how many of his works I'm missing, but do yourself a favor, get some Mattotti in your life. You will grow as an artist just from having this stuff touch your eyes.
Whole new world. 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 Whole new world.